Before you can stitch out your embroidery, you need to put your fabric and your stabilizer securely into an embroidery hoop. This step is really important and you want to make sure you do it correctly because it's going to affect the outcome of your embroidery and you want to make sure that everything goes okay. We're going to talk about a couple different ways that you can hoop up your embroidery projects. First, we're going to go over the standard or classic way that you would hoop up your fabric. So this is the method you'd want to choose if you were embroidering on a fabric that doesn't scar easily and is fairly stable. So like a quilting cotton or a home decor weight or any other similar woven fabric like that. So before you start, you want to make sure you have all your stuff that you need. So I have my fabric, which in this case is a quilting cotton. I have my stabilizer, which is a cutaway stabilizer, and I have my hoop, which is the 240 by 150 master hoop that comes with the Creative 1.5. If you want more info about hoops, make sure to check out the previous episode, which is all about hoops. And if you want more info on stabilizers, then you want to watch the episode before that, which is episode 3, which is all about stabilizers. So when you look at your hoop, you want to make sure that you have it laid out in the proper orientation. So you want to look at the text. First of all, make sure that you can see the text, and also make sure that it's right side up, meaning you can read it without having to read upside down. And you want the quick release lever of the outer hoop to be in the lower right hand corner. So the first thing we're going to do is open the lever, and then we're going to take out the inner hoop and set that aside. We'll take our stabilizer, and I'm going to slide the outer hoop over, and we want to lay our stabilizer over the outer hoop. And you want to cut your stabilizer so that it's slightly bigger than the outer hoop all the way around, so it's hanging off of the edges with enough clearance. Then we're going to take our fabric and we're going to lay our fabric right on top of the stabilizer and the outer hoop. Just make sure everything's nice and smooth and straight. And you can kind of feel through the fabric and just make sure that it's roughly straight in relation to the hoop edges and hanging over the edges equally on all 4 edges. The next thing we'll do is take our inner hoop and we're going to push that down right inside the outer hoop. If it's a little tough to get in there, you can loosen the retaining screw a little bit just to open that outer hoop a little bit more, and we're going to push it down. And then we're going to look at our fabric and just gently on the edges pull the fabric just to get rid of all the wrinkles. You don't want to stretch it, but you do want to make sure that it's nice and smooth within the inner hoop. Once you do that, we're going to close that quick release lever. If it's too hard to close, you don't want to force it. You want to loosen the retaining screw until you're able to close the lever fairly easily. And then you can go ahead and tighten that screw back up. And then your fabric is all ready to embroider. The second way you can hoop up your project is something called hoopless embroidery, which sounds kind of impossible, but actually the hoop is still involved, but instead of putting the fabric into the hoop in between the inner and outer hoop, it just floats on top, so it's not really attached to the hoop itself. So this is a good option to choose if you're embroidering a fabric that scars easily or is stretchy or might get distorted if you were to put it into a tight hoop. So in this case, the fabric I'm going to use is a fleece, so an acrylic fleece. And then I have my stabilizer again, the cutaway stabilizer, because it's a stretchy fabric, so I want to make sure it's nice and stable. And then I have again my hoop, the 240 by 150 master hoop that comes with the Creative 1.5. So I'm going to open the quick release lever and remove the inner hoop, just like I did before, and slide this to the middle. I'm going to take my stabilizer, which again is slightly bigger than the hoop all the way around, and this time I'm going to hoop up just the stabilizer. So I'm going to take the inner hoop and put it back down into the outer hoop, make sure the stabilizer again is nice and smooth, not wrinkled, but also not crazy stretched or anything like that. And then we'll go ahead and close the lever and tighten up that screw so everything is held firmly in place. So now the stabilizer becomes a firm foundation for you to be able to take your fabric that you're embroidering and just lay it down on top of the hoop like this. And then what you can do is take a few pins and pin the fabric to the stabilizer. And this is going to hold it securely until you get going with your embroidery. It is super, super important to not embroider over your pins. So this is really just a temporary thing until you get going. So once you've pinned it, it's recommended that you use the baste into hoop function before you start embroidering. So this is a button that you select that will have a dotted line around the embroidery, and what will happen is the machine, before it embroiders, will stitch a basting line in a square around the design. So you should do this with the foot pedal so you can go nice and slow and take the pins out as you baste. And once you have it basted into the hoop, then the fabric is attached to the stabilizer and it will stay nice and still as you embroider. If you're embroidering a thick or plush or textured fabric like the polar fleece, then you can take a topper stabilizer like the dissolve away water soluble stabilizer that I talked about in episode 3, and you can put that down on top before you baste, and that will give your machine a nice smooth surface to embroider over so the foot doesn't get caught in the fabric or the texture. And I have here an example of what it looks like once you have basted the fabric into the hoop. So you can see the pins are gone. I have my dissolve away on top of the fleece, and there's my basted square, and this is where my embroidery design would take place. So this is what hoopless embroidery looks like. Regardless of which way you hoop up your project, the alignment of your embroidery is an important factor because you want to make sure that your embroidery is going where you want it to go. So as I mentioned in the episode about hoops, all the PFAFF hoops come with a raised line in the center of each edge of the hoop. So this can really help you when you're trying to figure out how to align your fabric on your hoop. And again, as I mentioned in that episode, the raised line marks the center of the embroidery area, not necessarily the center of the hoop edge. So you want to go off of the markings if you're trying to center your fabric in the hoop. So here's how I would center my quilting cotton in the hoop. And you can do this for the hoopless embroidery as well. So I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to finger press it in half lengthwise. So this means I'm folding it in half and kind of creasing it, just like if it were paper and I was creasing the paper. And then you want to fold your fabric in the other direction and finger press that way as well. So what I'm doing is I'm temporarily marking the centers of both the horizontal and vertical edges of the fabric. So then I'll take my fabric, put it down over my stabilizer, make sure it's nice and flat and smooth, and then I'm going to take out my inner hoop just like before, and I'm going to take that and lay it down on the fabric and make sure that all 4 edges and all 4 raised lines on the edges are lined up with my finger pressed creases. And then I'll take my fabric and the hoop and lift it as one, and I'll put it down into my outer hoop. And you want to make sure that the outer hoop is nice and loose for this part in case you need to do any fine tuning, because as you put it in it might get a little messed up or misaligned. So you can just do your little fine tuning, push it down, and then go ahead and close your quick release lever and tighten your screw just like you did before. And now you know your fabric is centered in your hoop. So by now we've learned about our machine, we've picked our thread, we've picked our stabilizer, we've picked our hoop, and we've hooped up our project. So now we are finally ready to embroider. So make sure you watch the next episode of Machine Embroidery 101, where we stitch out a design on the PFAFF Creative 1.5.